Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to talk to you about something completely different, but the same topic. It's expanding horizons. And expanding horizons in terms of imaginations. I want you to bear with me 20 minutes now. To express the child again in yourself. To be an artist again. Because I think every child is born an artist. Every child is born an artist. It starts drawing immediately, right from the start. And exactly this is the topic I want to address. The drawing of pictures. Because I think in our maps, it's school atlases, we explicitly have forgotten especially this, that we like to draw maps. But all our maps in school atlases, they focus on politics, mathematics, like Google, like the blue dot on Google in our iPhones and all this. Yet we forget that the maps originally come from theater. It becomes something like a play. So I want to talk to you about the story of Atlas. The story of Atlas is very simple. The Atlas was termed after Mercator's first projection of the Earth by the map. Now, I think the Atlas figure that we are using in our maps, all the collection of maps indeed are called atlases. It's an interesting story to tell, but I think it is high time that we need a new imagination in our maps. A new horizon, because I think our maps are indeed limited, are very bordered in a sense, are very political in a sense, and hence I want them to be more artistic again. I want them to be much more artistic, because we can do it. Our maps are in our own hands. We can free the maps, and hence I play with the gods here, but for this I come back in a second. So this is the story. The story of Atlas is an interesting story. Actually, it was a punishment. He stood up against his father Zeus. He was a kind of a rebellious youth. I mean, many students and many youngsters, of course, they stand up against their parents at some point. We all do, right? At least you should, at some point, to grow up, right? This is what Atlas did to the same extent. He stood up against his father Zeus, and for this, the upper god Zeus punished him. He punished him by giving him to carry the world on his shoulders. It was a heavy burden, of course. The world on his shoulders the rest of his life. But Mercator, the famous cartographer of the 16th century, a Flemish guy, thought this is an interesting figure, this atlas. I think this is interesting because indeed it is a heavy load to represent the world, to make an imagination of the world. It's heavy, it's a heavy duty. So he gave the collection of maps the term atlas. But actually, it was a punishment. But, okay, this is what Mercator saw, the famous cartographer at the time. Actually, there are no borders on our planet. There are no borders as such. The borders that we draw, we do it ourselves. We represent those borders. We draw those borders ourselves. There are no borders. There's only physiographical variation in nature. There are no political borders as such. Borders are a human invention, a human artifact, a human construction that we start to believe in, that we have internalized in our maps and internalized in our consciousness. Like in schools. This is the atlas that you've been taught. This is for the Netherlands, but the country you come from, they all have their own atlases. So every school atlas, in effect, is focusing on their own country. Thereby forgetting almost, maybe consciously forgetting, there's a whole world beyond that horizon of the national border. There's a whole world beyond that. I was trained in my own primary school and in my own high school that I should learn everything about my own nation state, being the Netherlands in this case. So and also my young children, also in this room here today, present with me, they have to learn everything about where Roosendaal is, where Enkhuizen is, where Alkmaar is, whereas we are coming from Nijmegen, a town very close to the border of Germany. So our natural habitat is actually Germany. I go shopping in Germany. I go cycling in Germany. I go tanking, it's much cheaper, in Germany. So our natural surroundings is actually Germany. But I do not know anything about all the topography. I'm not so trained in it. And so neither are my young boys. They're not trained in this. We have to learn everything about our own nation state. So it started out as a wide map. There are no borders, but in our school atlases, we are trained to be politicians. We have to be nation-state members. We have to memorize and internalize those nation-states and those maps in that respect, leading to all kinds of very often very harsh, literally conflicts, exactly on those borders. Where are the borders? So there's a lot of border conflicts represented in this image here. The people are not allowed in, for instance, in the European Union, because we think they're not part of Europe. But Europe, there is no such a thing as Europe. Europe has no definite borders. We think they have definite borders, but there's no beginning or end to Europe. Nobody knows where the Far East begins. Nobody knows where the Near East begins. So nobody knows where Europe begins or ends. Yet, we make our politics exactly on those kinds of maps. We make our politics in the imagination that we feed ourselves. So we have internalized exactly this. We have internalized the maps that we are being trained at in schools. And this is a trap. We treat other people like in a zoo. Prison, a prison there, a prison of that animal there, a prison of the other animal there. So we kind of make a zoo, whereas of course we are not animals in a zoo. But so we train ourselves to learn to be caged at our schools, far away from the artistic endeavor that the mapping started out with. So here's my plea for today. My plea for today is let's free ourselves again. Let's get out of that cage of the mapping that we have been trained at schools and by politicians and mathematicians and so forth and so on. So no longer think in rows, no longer think in different colors, but look beyond the relationships and the connections. Make new connections beyond your nearest horizon. Make new relationships beyond your new horizon. And I think the day of today here is a perfect example of exactly doing that, making new connections across your near borders. United World College, an excellent example as it comes to me, for exactly doing this. Now, so we have to draw upon new imaginations. Now here's an imagination. The imagination of René Magritte, a painter at the time, a surrealistic painter, drawing Cécile Pan Pipe. This is not a pipe. But of course it's a pipe, of course, but not a pipe you can literally smoke, no? No way to do this. It's an interesting figure that he kind of is playing with the reality here. And this is what a map really is. It's playing with reality. It's a theater. It's a performance. It's an act. It's an artistic act, not a politician act, not a political act. It has become a political act, but it started out indeed as something like this. If this is true, that this is not a pipe, then this is not the world. Ceci n'est pas le monde. It's only the representation of the world. It's not the world itself. It's the representation of the world. We can think differently about our maps. We can think differently about our horizons. We can think differently about the borders that we draw on maps and think they really matter. And think they really are crucial to our daily lives. No, we have to look beyond that. That's my plea here today. So we think this is Europe. We really think this is Europe. But at the same time, of course, we know that throughout history, all these borders that now make this entity called Europe has changed over and over again. Let's watch this for a moment. Well, thank you. I was not the maker of this map, but thank you nevertheless. It is indeed a very important source. It gives us indeed an inspiration. I think it gives us an inspiration, doesn't it? It gives us the inspiration to reflect, to think again about the borders that we take for granted. There is no such a thing as a border that we should take for granted. There is no self-evident border, because all borders that were once raised, they will disappear. It's not a popular message for politicians, I tell you. Of course it's not a popular message for politicians, but it is true. Looking at these images, it just gives you the proof, doesn't it? That history, there's no legitimation that history gives you. Geography does not give you any legitimation for politics. All borders will change. The only constancy, indeed, of borders is change. Now, if this is true, then only we have to reflect on when a particular border or a map really begins, but also where. I think over time in our maps we have forgotten that all places have a very limited ending and beginning. There is no real beginning or ending in terms of a place. We're all connected. We're all connected every day. Even now, some people are Googling or WhatsApping or whatever. Even now, connecting to other places. So this place looks like a bordered place, but it's not. It's connected again to other places at the same time. This talk of 20 minutes is filmed, and it will be connecting new people from other places. So there's no beginning or end. So how can we speak of order overall and borders overall if the only constancy is indeed change? But we have forgotten this in our maps. This is the classic maps that we are being taught at schools. That the Mississippi is indeed is a dividing river in the United States. But it's not. It's not a dividing river. Look at this. It's connecting so many rivers. So I think this is what we have forgotten, to look at connections, to look at relationships beyond the near borders, beyond the politically made borders. Look at this, the flight connections, a very dynamic image. 24-hour flight connections, connecting people from all over the planet. Usually not addressed in school atlases. Usually not addressed in the maps that we make and the political maps that we draw, and that's sometimes leading to new conflicts. It is usually not addressed, all these connections. Or shipping density. I mean, there's so many other images that you could show. And it's exactly this, I think, is a call, a plea I like to make here today. We have to make new maps. We have to free the map from politics. We have to emancipate the map again and make it our own again, and literally draw new maps. Or global internet usage, 24 hours. So again, all kinds of very dynamic images of people connecting with each other on this same planet, without borders, without near borders. Of course there are borders, I'm not stupid. There are borders. But there's so many connections that are made. Or Facebook connections. This is the global Facebook connection out there. So where are the borders here? Where are the political borders here? They're not represented on the map. The only animal on this planet that is understanding what I'm talking about is this animal, because it has a nice world print on it. It is connected already. The only animal, the only living creature that is able to understand my message of today is this animal. Now, of course, it's a fabricated picture, of course. It is not a real animal. But still, it is interesting, because I like to see it as a kind of metaphor. A metaphor for the food that we eat. The food that we eat, or just have eaten right there in the lounge, it comes from everywhere. It's connected. It's globally connected. The clothes I'm wearing, and you are wearing today, is global. There are no borders on your clothes. They're all connected. And yet, we could continuously focus on what we politicize on maps. We continuously politicize maps in those little containers, in those little buckets, and the little boxes and forgetting exactly what we do on a daily basis, namely making connections on a daily basis. And hence, this is my plea. My plea for today is indeed to free the map and to call in the help. To call in the help of another God. Let's free indeed the map of Atlas. Let's release this old figure of Atlas that was once created by Mercator and be a new Mercator ourselves. Be a new Mercator ourselves, and let's release the burden of Atlas and give him some rest. He has done his job. He has done his job well. Of course, the atlases will remain. I'm not stupid. It will remain on school atlases, of course. But let's call in the help of his grandson, Hermes. Why not create a new god? Atlas was a god. Why not create a new god, a new kind of collection of maps, then termed after his grandson, which was much more a figure of movement, transgression. He was a communicator. He brought messages to people. He was connecting people to each other. Let's call in the help of Hermes, and let's start make maps ourselves. Let's remap the world. Let's remap our borders, and let's be artists again. Let's be artists again, and indeed use our child imaginations. Indeed, because I think the schools that we and in education, there's a hierarchy in terms of what we need to know. Cognition comes first. Mathematics comes first. Then humanities. And then, all in the bottom, way down in the bottom, there is drawing, there is dance, there is gym, and whatever. But I think those elements, drawing, dance, these are so important for our imagination. But in terms of hierarchy in an education system, they are kind of at the bottom of things. Whereas I think there is too much focus on only one thing, mathematics and politics. Let's indeed free our map and be the child again. Wake up the child again in our own drawings. Let's not educate out. Let's not educate out the drawing that is in us. Indeed, draw new maps. Why not? Of the world. Re-represent the world. And look beyond the horizon indeed. Thanks very much.